Hey there, and welcome back again to Yes, a Stripper podcast. On this podcast, we'll discuss how classifying each other as people and workers is dangerous to society and marginalized groups of people. We'll also talk about the climate in and outside of the strip clubs and all of the amazing things that strippers do. And of course, we'll talk about all of the things in between. I'm your queen, AM Davies, and this is Yes, a Stripper podcast. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Yes, a Stripper podcast. I want to talk to you about something pretty deep right now. I'm going to get a little personal with you. I want to talk to you about my personal dealings with my own whorephobia that I had leading up to maybe about a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? But something kind of happened in a conversation I was on with sex workers, and I literally had my eyelids just ripped open, practically stapled back onto my forehead, and I was forced to look at the things that I had said and done in the past when, dealing with this whorephobia situation. And I would not have thought I was whorephobic. I was a sex worker for a really long time. But I realized that I was doing things like classifying sex workers and saying like what I thought was good or bad, or like, I don't want to be associated with that, and all kinds of really negative, like damaging type of things. And I would say that in doing the more of the activism work that I've been doing, and especially doing this podcast, I've been so exposed to so many different sex workers and so many like enlightened and intelligent sex workers that have really been able to shed light on how we should be treating each other and speaking to each other, in that we can raise each other up, and that all people and women in all walks of life can be respected for their choices and for what they do with their bodies. And so it's been quite a journey for me. And I experienced shame for a little while, self-shame that I was whorephobic. But then I started to realize, no, it's people like me that have been like transformed, that have a larger responsibility to kind of tell everybody else, like, hey, listen, like, I know what you're going through. I felt this way too, but here's how it can be. And that's kind of, I just want to say, like, that's my commitment to you as society and to other sex workers, is to continuously admit that I was whorephobic and that I wanted to change, and I have changed. And now I'm a voice for others that, I want to like shepherd others into the light. Yeah. So our guest today, I actually am truly inspired by some of the posts that she makes on Instagram and by her own podcast, 50 Plus Tips podcast. So I'd like to welcome into the Zoom room, Danica. Please say hello, Danica.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Hi, thank you for being here. Yeah, I'm so thrilled. So Danica, for those of you who don't know, wrote to Yes, a Stripper podcast, and I was just so honored and thrilled, because I'm like, oh my God, like, she likes me, I'm doing something right, because you have had a podcast for like close to 40 weeks now. Yeah, and this for us is like episode 18 or 19, like, so you're like twice as far along as me. So thank you for noticing and for being community,
Yeah, I'm always like creeping new stripper ventures. 'Cause I think it's important as a marginalized community to support one another, for sure.
Yeah, and I noticed that you creep on the community because you have, like, you ask baby strippers, like, you find brand new baby strippers to be on some of your episodes.
Yeah, for
yeah.
Sure.
Can you talk about like why, like what inspired that episode particular? I don't know if you've done more than one, but I was going through your stories and I saw one where you're like, actually, I'm not a baby stripper anymore, and I forget I need a real baby stripper. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, not only am I just old and I think I have like early onset, but I just also like the landscape of sex work is so much different now, just 7 years later than when I started, and the strip clubs are so different that I think it's important to kind of give voices to the newbies or the baby strippers that are coming in and what their situation is and what they're dealing with, because part of me forgets, but part of me is just different now. It was a lot more underground, even just 7 years ago. The community wasn't as strong as it is now. Especially here in Vancouver, I find it's really taken off in the last few years. But yeah, also too, I think sometimes when you're new in an industry, you feel like your voice isn't worthy of being heard, or you have nothing to say. And I think that's really doing a disservice to the women in the industry. So I think it's important to also have a safe space for new girls in the industry to talk about what they're going through. And that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, right?
Yeah.
Not asking questions, but answering them, and having that open dialogue with different levels of expertise.
Yeah. I wonder what they know about what it was like for us in like 7, 10. For me, it was even like 18 years ago when I started. And like, I view it as it was better back then for us. What are your thoughts on that, like then versus now?
I think there's definitely pros and cons, like everything.
Yeah.
Back then, and where I was working was much more like cookie cutter. Like you looked a certain way, you act a certain way. You had big breasts, you were very slender, long hair, natural hair color, no tattoos. So I think it's good in the sense now that they're a lot more open to different ideas of beauty. I think that's a huge step forward. Other pros and cons: pros that there's a lot more communication now, and with communication comes more knowledge. So there's more ebooks available and things like that, and different sources that new dancers and new sex workers can reach out to and learn about saving and protection and boundaries and all that, where that communication wasn't readily available years ago. Cons: oversaturation. From like a more of a selfish standpoint, right? That more women in the industry, harder to sell, and a lot of new girls coming in can tend to underprice, and that's like a slippery slope to get into, right? Because you don't want to tell a woman what she can sell her services for. Like, who am I to tell a woman that $200 is too cheap? But things like Rita's List, right, where you're seeing a lot of very young girls coming in, freshly 18, selling, bareback intercourse, an hour long, 2 hours long, for $200 Canadian. And you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the biggest cons I kind of feel, and I often hear from what I call veteran dancers and veteran sex workers, is the oversaturation takes that price point down quite a bit.
Yeah, we had a male stripper on one of our episodes who said like that there are some places that are underground here that are like male strip clubs, and that they're doing like bareback $1 blowjobs.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Which is also like, while in one way I see that as undercutting the competition severely, at the same time, like, I don't think that's for everyone. And so maybe the same could apply to that scenario. Like I get, like, I feel the same way. I'm like, well, cause like that happened in the aerial community too, right? This can be applied across all industries. I remember in New York in the aerial company when aerial activities started to become more popular at like major events, that newer aerialists were like way undercharging, and the professional aerialists were getting really pissed. And I think that it's just like, well, what quality are you looking for? And that there is potentially room for everybody, but it does hurt the industry as a whole. And like, can we come together somehow and like create price points that make sense for all, or do we just do whatever?
No, I 100% agree. And I remember I made a post about that. And I mean, I curate a lot of posts in the sense where, I find them online. I try to always kind of give credit where credit's due. So I can't take credit for this one, but there was a post about that saying how, lowering your prices, and the idea behind it was that lowering your prices doesn't always bring in the best clients, and it kind of like messes with the industry. And I had a lot of what I call squares, so like non-sex workers, commenting, I'm a hairdresser and I feel the same way, and I do nails, and it's the same issue for me. So it's definitely across the board in any, especially service industry, or where you have more autonomy over your prices. Like, it can really really mess up your You're selling.
Yeah, it's just interesting how it's like an overall generalized like irritant to people who are freelancers and are setting their own prices. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
So speaking of baby strippers, I think some of the things that I found really interesting that you have talked about in the past is, well, first your baby stripper crash course. I just think that's great. But it also ties in, I think, with something that you wrote, which is muggles taking pole dance classes. Because a lot of baby strippers are those muggles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on muggles taking pole dance classes?
Yeah. So, I mean, muggles, squares, civilians.
Civvies. Yeah.
All these terms, right?
Yeah.
And I always say it like, like it's said in a loving way, kind of.
Totally. Yeah, we love them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, obviously, pole dancing is without a doubt, and dancing in general is without a doubt, a great way to stay in shape. It's a great way to explore your sensuality. 100% for that. My issue is when you see non-sex workers taking a class and then simultaneously shaming who actually gets paid for doing pole work, shaming strippers. And I know your name kind of is a product of that. Yes, a stripper, because correct me if I'm wrong, it has to do with the way people were like, well, I'm not a stripper.
Exactly.
Yeah. I echo the same, I think, vision or ideas that you have, where it's like, what? Like, why are you so adamant to like separate yourself from the community?
Yeah.
You want to simultaneously enjoy the product of their labor.
Yeah.
And we see that very often throughout many avenues. Men who comment on OnlyFans girls being whores, but then they fully enjoy their free porn. You're like,
Well,
okay.
yeah. I mean, don't you think that that's a symptom of whorephobia, though? Like, I don't want to be associated with them, and I'm so
100%.
terrified that you'll think that that's me. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And unfortunately, I spoke with this with a friend recently. Whorephobia isn't an outsider issue only, right? We see internal stigmatization, internal whorephobia, just with, let's say in the Corona time right now, with girls being online. And they're like, well, I'm an online girl. I don't do in person, as if it's like, I'm not like them. So we see a lot of that issue.
Is that happening? I haven't seen that yet.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Like, I mean, there is a certain, like, I get asserting your boundaries.
No, for sure.
But to be like, I'm not like that, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not me. Like,
yeah.
What's wrong with that? That is me that does it.
Yeah.
Is there something wrong with what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And I completely echo what you just said. It's like, there's a very fine line between saying, oh, I don't offer those services. And it's very much the intent of how you say things, right? Like, I don't offer those services. This is what I do. As opposed to, oh, no, I don't do what those girls do.
Right. Yeah. I had somebody ask me about cuddling service once. He didn't know that's what he was asking me about, but he was like, I just want someone to like hold me and cuddle with. He was very sweet. And I was like, oh, you're talking about cuddling service. And he's like, oh, is that a thing? And I was like, absolutely, it's a thing. And I was like, but I don't provide that service. Also, I don't live in Florida. I would I would consider the service. I've not considered it, but then I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I would. Why not? But I also was like, but that's not something that I provide, but I can maybe try to find. And I asked around, I asked my friends, and I don't think that cuddling service is like super prominent, and like there's no hashtag for it on Instagram. I looked.
Yeah. Hashtags on Instagram is a whole other issue.
Yeah, that's a whole other. Yeah. Yeah, so I have a company called United Pole Artists, and it's all about like pole dancing coming up, and and so this episode is going to come out well after, but like in a couple days I am going live on that account. It's like 189,000 followers, and I'm going to tell them what I really think, and then I'm going to tell them I'm leaving and I'm closing this account and I'm deleting it.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the reason behind that?
Because
I'll find out now, but
yeah, because all I want to do is this, like, talk about strippers and sex workers and advocate and change laws and reform an entire industry. And I cannot do that being immersed in the pole dance industry. That's just like not like, if I write stuff about strippers on UPA, I get a like love, but backlash. And that's a big part of the reason for this podcast, is because, like, what is this divide? And then hence also why I was talking about whorephobia. And then when I was listening to your episode, you did a respectful call out on somebody else's podcast about how they were talking about, oh, porn stars are just coked out.
Yeah.
So rude.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like what I'm a little tired of. It's like, why is somebody bad or not up to your personal moral standards because of what they choose to do with their body? And I'm like really tired of having the same conversation over and over again in the pole community. So I'm like removing myself from the pole community in that sense. And I'm just going to be like, just shoving all of this stripper sex work stuff into their face from now on, from different platforms. That's my plan.
I support it. No, yeah, 100%. Yeah, you heard that episode. I actually was on their podcast. I don't know when it's coming out. I just did this last week.
Can you, before you launch into it, tell the audience what episode of yours it was? Because I don't remember, so that they can get context behind this conversation.
Yes,
you remember off your head? Yeah, you're right, 100%. It was 33. Insecure girlfriends and ethical porn.
Yeah.
That's the one. Thank you for going down that road with me.
Okay.
Yeah, so go ahead, launch. Do it.
So like we said in the first beginning, I'm very much someone who's constantly looking for new stripper podcasts, new ventures. I also try to support local, females or female identifying people, and just because local, I like to support, like to listen to local podcasts and throw them a follow and whatever.
Yeah.
And these two individual ladies are a little different than me. Their style's a little different. It's more like girl chit chat and aura readings and stuff like that. But they mentioned that they kind of briefly touched on porn. They asked each other, how do you feel about porn? And one of the girls' response was, yeah, porn, all the porn actresses or porn stars, she called them, are coked out and drug addicts, and that's why they're so crazy. And because I've been doing sex work advocacy for long enough, that as soon as something like that is said, I'm like,
yeah, 100%. Like, yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, when you said it, when you read that, when you like said it out loud, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, like literally, I do my makeup, like listening to them, I'm like, bing. All that. And of course, I could have just been like, whatever, like ignorant comment, whatever. But I feel like, and I say this often, if you want to be an advocate, if you want to stand for people's rights, you need to call out people. Like that is now your job, because if you let things slide, it's part of the problem. That's what you're never going to see change. And it's not always fun. It's not always fun to be like, come off as the asshole, to be like, hey, that's wrong. Hey, we're going to talk about this. Hey, I'm going to confront you on this. It's not like the best position to always be in, but it's kind of a necessary evil, right? If you want to see change, you kind of have to be that like stickler that's like, no, it's not okay. And I've used this analogy before. When you want to be a figurehead or you want to be at the front of change, you're often going to get the arrows. Like you're going to be the one at the front getting the arrows hit at you and just having to take it to protect the people behind you that aren't ready to come to the front. So I think that's part of being a sex worker that's very out. You just kind of have to accept that. So I sent them the email that you heard me read on the thing. And I think I worded it quite nicely.
Oh my God. It was so eloquent. It was so beautifully prepared and thoughtful and not trying to make anybody wrong. It was, girl, it was perfect.
Yeah, but I think too, like I'm very, I'm not to be like, I'm amazing, but I'm not a dumb person. I have 2 degrees. Like I've done my fair share of university. I can be quite well-spoken when I want to be, when I'm not swearing every second word. And, I know how to write. So I think that's also important when you want to call someone else, to be well-worded and writing it quite clearly and professionally, so they can't go back at you and be like, well, you're just a dumb bitch, It's usually like fight you on, right? is that you're too stupid for whatever stance you're having. So yeah, so they had seen it. I saw the scene, good old Instagram, let me know when people ignore you. And they didn't reply. And I was like, okay. Ignore me. I'm not the one. Like, I am not the one ignored. So my girlfriend, who I sometimes have on my podcast, Riley, she's a much quieter version. You know, she's very much the pacifist. You know, or the pacifier, who wants kind of peace and so it's good. It's a good balance because sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna kill this fucker.
Yeah,
being nice. But so me and her talked about it. I was like, yeah, they're going live today. I'm gonna call them out, because then you're whether you're gonna ignore it or not, your listeners are gonna see it.
Yeah.
So I just wrote down saying, hey, once again, didn't appreciate what you said in the last episode regarding porn stars. I'd like if you refer to my message or something like that. And they both kind of were like, when they read it, and they're like, I don't know what this girl's talking about. You had a week to respond to this. You should have messaged us privately. That's a professional thing to do. And I was like, no, I did message you privately, and you read it. And they're like, well, we don't know what you're talking about. We'll talk about this later. So I was like, whatever. So I signed out, and then they carried on with their live, kind of called me rude, and I was not the place to do it. I should have respected their space. Eventually they reached out again because I'm well, you don't know me yet, but my friends always joke I'm like the queen of screenshots.
Yeah.
Like there's that saying which I got from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or something, where it's like say it, forget it, write it, regret it. Where it's like if things are in writing, like they can be used against you.
Yeah.
So of course,
totally.
I will screenshot shit, right? So I screenshot my message, the date, the scene message, that here it is again. We actually had a good kind of back and forth where they're like, we apologize for how it was taken or if it offended you. Would you like to be on the podcast? I said yes. So hopefully that podcast coming out or has come out by this time. But yeah, it was a good conversation. But yeah, I think you have to kind of be that person that calls people out. And I believe that the confrontation doesn't have to be a negative thing.
100%. Yeah.
And I'm all for it. I've always been a confrontational person. So
you are a confrontational person.
Yeah, very much so. Especially, but I know my boundaries. Like I won't talk on things I don't know of. When I guest lecture at the university and people ask, oh, what about men and men stripping? And what about this? I go, that's such a valid question. I'm curious myself, but I can't talk on that because I'm not, I don't identify as a man, so like, I think you need to know where your place is to talk. That being said, me and Riley talked about it afterwards, how the response to it. And, I provided, everyone's human. And sometimes when you're met with confrontation you don't expect, you can be taken back and you don't always have the most put together response. So, I forgive them for being like, that was rude or whatever they said. And it wasn't the space for it. But that brings to question, if they had said, a racist remark or something about about sexual orientation or something that people are very much, or a lot of people are behind now, would they have said that to the person? If they had said, hey, you said a racist remark and it offended me, would they have said, hey, this isn't the place? Don't talk about that here. No, because they would have had so much backlash for saying that, right? So it brings to question, why was it okay to tell me that I couldn't tell you I was offended by something? And the only thing that I can come up with is that we don't view sex workers as having legitimate voice. So I can tell you when you can be upset. I can tell you when you can talk about it. I can shut you down when you're upset. And I think that's a real problem. But that's just me being like, nah, don't shut me up. Don't,
No, you're right.
I'm not in no way saying that it's on the same level of racism and anything like that at all. Just the idea that though.
It's an ism and it's a serious ism. And you're right, it's not racism, and and I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges. However, sex workers are murdered at a pretty high rate, discarded, arrested, treated like shit, bullied, the butt of everyone's joke.
Oh yeah, it's a metric for failure in our society now. If you fail at something, I'll be a stripper, I'll be a prostitute. It's like, if I fail at this, then that's the end result.
Yeah, and maybe the degree of seriousness isn't the same as racism, because when you're born into the body as opposed to you choose to be a sex worker, at least in the sense that ideally, I mean, I don't want anyone to be forced into sex work. And so ideally, I'm talking about consensual sex work at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but so it's reminding me of a recent article that just came out on bitchsomething.org. Fuck, I'm forgetting what it's called. It's this article by Sasha Cohen, and it's about sex workers are no longer the butt of the joke, they're making them. And it's about how, like, she opens with this story about Chris Rock basically saying, I just got to keep my baby off the pole. Like, I'll have been a good dad if my daughter's not a stripper. And it's like, you know, and one of the things that also like irritates me about American Dad is like the dead hooker and the trunk jokes and the all strippers are on meth and have their children locked in their car jokes. And it's just like, when does that end? And even I was at yeah, and I was at this seminar several months around this time last year, and it was in a room of 150 people. And the leader of the seminar knew that I was a stripper. And one of the people stood up and spoke, and they made a stripper joke in front of and the whole room laughed because it's okay to laugh at strippers because there's none of them are here. Because why would a stripper be here with all of us normal, healthy people? So, and I just sat there and everyone laughed, and I just sat there, and the speaker immediately looked at me and they're like, is that the case? And I was like, and then everyone kind of like the whole room kind of was like, huh? Like, because then it was like, oh, fuck. Like everyone figured out in a split second that y'all just made a joke about a stripper and they're sitting right here. So do you feel good about that now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And I think that you're right that people think it's okay just to make these flippant remarks about sex workers and these jokes. And it's like, it's really damaging and painful and tiresome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exhausted. Like, you know, like we've done that joke. You guys laughed enough about it. It's hilarious. You know, strippers aren't, you know, sex workers aren't humans. We get it. And I think too, you know, it's on a grander scale with our laws and the stigma that perpetuates them and stuff. It starts with things like that. You know, it starts with little remarks about, oh, all porn stars are drug addicts. Like that just perpetuates those like damaging stigmas that like result in never viewing sex workers as humans. So they don't have basic human rights, don't have workers' rights. Like it's like the small thing that like leads into like all the big things. So I think we need to kind of back it at those small levels. You know, when you're in a room and someone makes a stripper joke, being like, I'm gonna say something on this because that's not fucking funny, and you're gonna say that to my face now. Like I would have been like thriving if I was sitting with you in that room.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it wasn't a terrible joke, but it was still a joke on behalf of us. It wasn't like the Chris Rock joke or like the dead hooker in the trunk joke. It was like a joke about stripper hours, but it was still like.
But still, why is that? Like, why are you making fun of another group to like get a laugh?
Exactly. Yeah. Very tiresome. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on as well. I saw one of your topics as there was a phrase you used, which was toxic monogamy. And girl, that just turned me on so much because I am so into not monogamy in my relationships because I do find that the majority of monogamous relationships are toxic. And that's been my personal experience. I'm not speaking generally. So can you just touch on like your viewpoints on toxic monogamy, what that means to you?
Yeah, well, I think, and again, like everyone's entitled to their own views. When I speak, it's 100% my view, my own experiences, my own prerogative. You know, so no one needs to at me being like, my husband and me are great. And me be like, I saw your husband last weekend. But yeah, I think I've had enough of experience in my own life or, you know, vicariously through other people where it's this idea of like, you are mine, in the sense of like ownership, and like, you can't have eyes for anyone else. You only get aroused by me. And I just think that breeds such a toxic, unrealistic expectation of like partner roles, that, you know, we are human and we can get aroused about other people. And you know, it can sometimes, you see the extreme where people don't want their partner looking at porn, and they don't want this, and I'm like literally the only person you can have eyes for. And then I also, another side of it too is, you know, we don't, and this is the analogy I try to use when I explain it to people, is we don't go to one doctor for everything. You know, we have different specialists that are good for different areas. And it's a lot to ask of one person to satisfy you sexually, mentally, emotionally, in every aspect. That's a huge ask. And personally, like, I'm not capable of doing that for one person. I can't be everything for them at all times.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, yeah, I think you're just kind of setting someone up for failure to expect that from them, especially for a long period of time. You know, so for me, my nature of work, I'm not technically monogamous because of my nature of work, but I am monogamous as a romantic relationship. Like, I do only have one extremely romantic, if you want to call it that, partnership at a time.
Yeah.
But
I'm so like in love with everything you're saying.
oh, yay.
Yeah.
Good. All bullshit. I'm just joking. But the way in my life, what I've found that works is short-term monogamy, in the sense where like, hey, we all have a role to play in each other's lives, and I like to think that I'm always growing and developing. And, you know, let's do this in each other's lives while we're growing and like working with each other, and it works. And when it doesn't work, like, that's okay to outgrow people, and it's okay to outgrow the situation we have right now. And I don't know if I'd ever find a partner who I would be growing with at the same rate, in the same trajectory, at the same type, for an extended period of time. And I don't want to stunt my growth. I don't want to stunt their growth. And I don't want to feel guilty if I am aroused by someone else or something else that they're not into, or they're, you know, so I think that's when it starts to become toxic, when we start, you know, really boxing our partner into like what we think they're allowed to do, or what we expect from them, or we put too many demands on them, if that makes sense. And that being said, like, communication's everything in everything. That. Mm-hmm. And trust, and like, and loyalty, in the sense, not necessarily monogamous loyalty, but loyalty in the sense where like, I'm loyal to like your safety and your protection and like your demands, and I see you there and will communicate about it, if that makes sense. Like, that kind of loyalty where like, I'm not going to intentionally screw you over.
Right. Yeah, like a business partner almost.
Yeah, in a nice way. And hey, if they want to pay me.
Yeah. So I've had people, because I've had this way of like wanting to be, I was in a 7-year-long monogamous relationship. It was really hard. I really wanted to cheat sometimes, but I knew it was breaking his boundaries. And I cheated just a little bit, but and that's a different story. But I've talked to people, like, since then, I've been like, never again, never again. I'm never settling. Like, that's my boundary is, I'm not going to be your one and only, and you're not going to be my one and only for like this years and years and years. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk to people about it, they're like, well, is this not like cause problems? Like, doesn't that create jealousy or like fighting and I'm like, well, if you have, even in a healthy monogamous relationship, if you're not communicating properly, you're still going to have the fighting, and then you're going to have the sneaking around and cheating, which I see so much of in other people's romantic lives. And it's like, if you're just talking and communicating, it's just like any other relationship. But just people put so much definition and like weight on sex in general.
Yeah, they do. One of the most like solid, and this is, again, I don't know what goes behind closed doors, the experience I've had with them, I had them on my podcast. They are a couple, and they call it their slutissance. It's like a slutty renaissance kind of thing. It's like, so they're like swingers, but they're like, we don't call ourselves swingers because, you know, everyone pictures these like old weird people that like go to parties and like they're, you know, in their
black fishnets and leather belts.
Yeah, and they, you know, they're having like a midlife crisis or whatever. But
did we just shame swingers, by the way? Did we just shame swingers.
No. They just don't call themselves swingers. No. They just don't call themselves swingers. They know like society, that's what society looks like.
Yeah.
They are swingers.
Yeah.
They experiment with other people and they go to swingers clubs and all that. So they call us slutty songs because they feel like that resonates more with them. But Libby and Greg, they're on one of my episodes, and the way they speak about their experiences and the way they speak about each other and the way they handle their situation is just so beautiful. And they just exude so much love and respect for one another with this idea of like, I enjoy other people and I enjoy her enjoying other people and vice versa. And, I remember they explained in one part where because naturally people get jealous, people feel left out. If you ever had a threesome, there's awkward moments and you're like, why is Dick touching me? And like, like it's weird, right? So, they have a thing that they say, and I believe it was that they ask each other for a kiss at some point if they're feeling kind of like left out or they just need to kind of come back at themselves. So I think there's people that can really handle relationships in the non-traditional way so beautifully and so successfully. And I think it's a real unfortunate view that a lot of people have, that to have a successful relationship, you're like monogamous with each other and you're one and only for a long period of time. And like, hey, if that works for you, power to you. But it's just, I don't think it's realistic for a lot of people.
Not for a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, for some people it does seem to work for them, but that's also because of the existence that they manage, which is like a lot of that has to do with their overall beliefs, I think. And their just way of choosing to be. And my way of choosing to be is like, I just want to explore. I want to go to parties. I want to know what this tastes like and what that smells like and what this feels like. I want to know about you. And also I'm really interested all of a sudden in women with penises. I'm pretty sure that I need to manifest that happening in my life because I've been talking about it randomly for the last few months. And then last night I just happened to find a video of one on Pornhub and I was like, yes.
Love it.
What is it? Like, I want to try that. Why not? Why are we set in these parameters of like, things must be this way? And then also, how do we get people to stop being so hung up on sex when it's literally the reason we all exist and are here?
Mm-hmm. Isn't that funny? That's one of the things I say. It's so bizarre that sex is such a taboo thing, but it's the one thing we all have in common, and no one wants to talk about it, but everyone's kind of doing it, or some people are doing it unless you're asexual or whatever. But and we're so weird about it. And I think the best way to do that is just kind of making safe spaces, like a podcast, like Instagram pages that are getting shadow banned, so like Twitter pages and things like that, and just opening up that floor for people to talk in a shameless kind of way. And slowly but surely you see that trickle effect. You might think you only have this small imprint on like changing people's lives, but I know I did an episode, not to keep shamelessly plugging my podcast.
No,
but
it's fine.
Originally I was just trying to have sex workers because I said, I just want sex workers to have a voice, and I feel like that's something sorely lacking. And then the more I spoke to people about it and the more talks I did in like public places where there were squares and that, I had more women coming up to me saying, I struggle with this and this is my sexuality and blah, blah, blah. And it takes, no, there needs to be more safe spaces for everyone to talk about sex and what they're exploring. And I had an episode with Peaches Malone come on, and she's been in her marriage, I want to say for around 15 years, around there. And she's come to a place where she's like, I want to start exploring things. I want to go to sex parties. I don't know where that's going to take me, but I don't want, I'm in my 20s, I was very sexually liberated, and I feel like that's died off, and that's not what I wanted for me. I wanted to keep exploring. And she's at this point in her life where, not to speak for her, but this is kind of what she had said on my podcast, was that she was, wanting to get back to her original liberated sexual roots. And her husband wasn't exactly on board. And what does that look like? And how are they going to navigate that? And that really resonated with people, because I think people are ashamed, especially because of toxic monogamy, to come out and say, hey, I'm also wanting to explore and my partner doesn't. And like, how do we navigate this? And I think giving voices to those people that seem like outliers, that are never really outliers, if that makes sense, it opens that door for people to be like, hey, me too. yeah, hey, I experienced this too. Oh, I'm not alone, you know?
Yes, I do know. I know exactly. Yeah, I met someone recently who's like, I wanted to explore in my marriage and they didn't. And I started noticing like the end of things because, I wanted to talk to sex workers online and that was considered cheating in their eyes. And then like eventually just like they went separate ways because one of them was more interested in learning about their sexual expression and the other was like nah to all of that. And so yeah, I definitely do think that's why sex workers are so great, because that is like we allow that space for people
Mhm.
to like understand that it's okay to explore and like to be like we will never ever judge you. Like you can ask and talk about and tell me your craziest weirdest fantasy and I'll never be like, ooh, that's like I'll never shake my head. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, one of the things I always say is like, I don't yuck someone's yum. As long as you're a consenting adult, I seriously do not give a fuck what orifices you're using, how many you're using, what's going in there. Like, as long as you're consenting adults, I do not care. And I
Exactly.
think too, on the flip side of what you're saying is also not shaming someone who doesn't want to explore. Like
Right.
some people are very, and for lack of a better term, vanilla, and there's nothing wrong with being vanilla.
Mhm.
And I think when you're in a relationship where you're coming to the person and being like, I want to explore this, you also have to respect that people might not meet you where you're at. And I
Yeah.
think that too can be hard when you're super sexually liberated. Sometimes we can we can go too far and start shaming people that we envision aren't sexually liberated, just
Yeah.
because it doesn't look like what we think sexual liberation looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like it all comes down to communication and
Yeah.
having open dialogue and a safe space to do so.
Yeah, so that actually brings me to like one other point that I wanted to make sure that we cover, which is what to do when your boyfriend isn't supportive of your sex work, which is kind of tied in.
Cut him out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'm 29 now, right? So I have been in sex work for the majority of my 20s, which is a huge growing period of your life, especially with navigating relationships and becoming, you go through these not so serious relationships and you start to kind of develop your own and whatnot. And I've met people that have been like, oh, that's awesome what you do. I'm super like, yay, feminism. I'm like, do what you want with your body. And that usually lasts till about 2 months. And then suddenly not so cool. Or I find too, a lot of people, it's really hot to fuck a stripper, really hot to fucking date a stripper, really hot to tell their buddies about the stripper.
Yeah.
And then it gets too serious. And now it's like, wait, but I don't want to marry a stripper. I
Yeah.
don't want to fuck my parents about a stripper. So this like whorephobia is very prevalent with that. And I think it's because we have this like whore Madonna complex still very much alive, where like, the mother is like this Madonna and she has to be this virginal thing or you're a fucking whore. It's these two polarizing ideas. And for some reason, people have trouble meshing that. Which is one of the reasons why I love talking with women who are mothers and, have had successful relationships. Not that that's, a metric for success, but because it goes against this idea of like whore Madonna complex. But yeah, so I've experienced a lot of that where it's like, I'm super hot and it's super hot to date me. And like, oh, but I don't want my parents meeting you.
Yes, queen. And me too. I have been broken up over my Instagram account before. Like, I love your Instagram account. I show it to my friends. And then a month later, it's like, what am I going to tell my mom? Literally.
Yeah.
Those are his
Yeah.
words. What am I going to? And I was like, my bubbles and burst. Like, how dare you? Yeah, I was cool. I was a novelty. And now I'm being cast aside.
They love and hate you for the same shit, right? And then I also get to when people date you. So this is like, me putting mascara on, and that's like the most you're going to get from me on like my best days. And I just truly do not give a fuck. And you're not going to see me wearing laundry at home. Sorry to burst everyone's bubbles right now. I'm not going to be wearing my pleaters around the house unless I'm making content. And it's funny, these visions people have in their head when they date a stripper, like you're going to backflip on their dick every night. And like,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know, you're like a porn star all the time. I think that kind of rocks our world sometimes too. Right.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem for me is, this idea of like, well, what are you gonna do when we get married? What are you gonna do when we have kids? Like, what are you gonna tell the kids? Are you gonna be a stripper forever? Blah, blah, blah. That's been an issue. But I'm at a point in my life right now. I was previously in a relationship and for about a year and a half, and he was quite supportive. You know, I even would invite him when I had clients who liked like voyeurism. They would pay to watch us. And I think that was a good way of kind of showing him, one, the clients aren't all these like things you see on social, like the way that media portrays it. You know, they're all these like really creepy, disgusting men who like take advantage.
Normal people. Yeah.
Yeah. He saw that, he's like, oh, are these like all your clients? I'm like, yeah, like I have autonomy over who I choose, and I choose like respectful, like, you know, good men, because they're out there as clients more so than not, in my experience.
Yeah.
So that was a good way of kind of like pulling back that curtain a bit for him. But it was his family I had the most issue with for sure in that relationship. Was, you know, they were devout Mormons, and
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
as soon as I said that, they were like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they
Oh,
had an
the
issue.
Mormons.
Yeah. And if he did something wrong, like if he got caught lying or cheating, and there's a part, once he was a little physically, well, not literally, he was quite physically abusive at one point. And, you know, his mom was like, well, you're a stripper. It's too hard for him.
Oh my
God. I literally called her. I was like, you're the problem. You know, you encourage this like horrible toxic masculinity and like victim blame. She didn't like that, but that's okay.
Yeah, of course she didn't like that. Of course she didn't.
I think called out, right? But it's hard. It's fucking hard.
Yeah, and you gotta let them go. It's either that or you spend hours and hours of educating them. You know, if you really truly want to make it work, it takes a lot of patience, and it's just
and therapy. Like, go to therapy. There's nothing wrong. I think all relationships should go to therapy. People in general, I think, should go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with it. You don't need to be broken to go to therapy.
Oh, no, we all need therapy.
Yeah, you just gain more tools, and that can be very helpful in a relationship, especially one that's going through, you know, sex work and stuff like that.
Danica, I knew this was going to happen. I have more things I want to talk to you about, and like the time is ticking by, but I'm going to bring up this one last thing, and this is going to be it, and I promise. Your posts on Instagram about Mrs., Ms., and Miss, that women have to be identified as a Mrs., as married, Ms. as widowed or an adult woman not married, or Miss as a young unmarried woman, and Mr. is just fucking Mr. And why do you have to define women by their fucking marital status? And I was like, oh my God, I have never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, okay, what do we call it? What is it? What do we all have that's like Mr.?
Yeah, I know, right? So like from what I always gathered, MS was supposed to be this like unidentifying, like, you know, you could be Miss, you could be Miss, you could be MISS, you could be MRS. That's kind of how I've always just used MS if I need to. I also feel like with the, you know, people coming into more this idea that, you know, how people self-identify and they're being much more accepting, I would like to think we'll start seeing that completely off forms that we have to fill out, because what the fuck does that have to do with anything? But, you know, I also see that a lot, this kind of like owner, like, are you owned by a man, then you're worthy, or like this male, our identity constantly being associated with the men in our life, and that I see it really prevalent when people ask you out. If you say like, oh, I'm not interested, they go, are you dating someone? As if like that's the only justification for you not wanting them. And then if you say yes or no, they act accordingly. It can't just be like, no, I'm single, I just don't want you. You know?
Yes, because I've been struggling with lately, like, because I used to do this when somebody would ask me out and I didn't want to say yes, be like, oh no, I have a boyfriend. And I'm like, I'm never fucking doing that again. I decided like that's 2 years ago. Yeah.
But and that's completely fair you did that, because it seems like the only way people will fuck off is if they think that another man already owns you. And they're like, oh, okay, she's already called for. It's not like you can have your own autonomy and just say, hey, no, I don't want you. You know, isn't it wild?
I know. And
I'm like,
but it's still like, even knowing that, like, even like truly knowing that to my core, like saying to someone, no, thank you. Cause I'm trying to talk to, I talked to my mom about a lot of stuff, and I told my mom, somebody asked her out recently, and I was like, if you don't want to do it, Mom, all you have to say is no, thank you. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to say I'm called for. Yeah, and
can you imagine if you asked a guy out and he was like, "Oh, I'm not interested, thank you." Would you ever then respond with, "Well, do you have a girlfriend?" Like, I don't think I would ever say that. I'd be like, "Okay, he's not interested. I don't need justification.
Yeah,
let me try to convince him to give me a chance." Like,
yeah,
it's so weird.
Yeah. I'm seriously, like, from now on, just being like, no thank. And I think I have done it before quarantine, when I actually could see men in real life.
What are those things?
Deja vu. Yeah. But yeah, wow. So I'm so grateful for that post. Thank you, because like I never had looked at it that way before, and it's just so clear and obvious.
Mm-hmm. I can't take full credit. I totally stole that post from someone, and I always tag whoever the person is.
Yeah.
Usually it's like Let's Let It Up or another larger Instagram, but why not their content? So
well, whatever. I found it through you, so thank you for making that more visible via whoever originally posted it. All right. Definitely went over time talking to you, but I don't.
Want to be fabulous just like these strippers? Pay attention. It's stripper tips.
Okay, Danica, tell everyone what your stripper tip is, please.
Okay, since you listen to my podcast, I can literally do a whole episode on tips. And I very much like to, because if I've learned it the hard way, why should you have to? But the biggest thing, and very much prevalent right now with like Corona situation, is saving. When I worked in Fort Mac, when I first started, we made insane fucking money. And do you know how much I spent? Insane fucking money. I know Sasha said it on the episode, you start to hemorrhage like money when you make good money. And that was the biggest thing. And I think, again, that's something I've seen change a lot in the industry over the years, is the business mindset of girls now in the industry is so much better than it used to be. But yeah, save. Now what I try to do is I try to spend like 10% of what I make each shift is like, if I make like a really good shift. Okay. So say I make, for tax reasons, I don't want to say how much I make, but say I make like a good amount of money. I'll let myself have 10% of that spending, and the rest is going between like into my savings or into like bills. And then, I average that out. If it was like, I made $50 on a shift because it was horrible and the club was dead. Okay, I'm not gonna like be like $5, but like, but yeah, just saving and having a plan and investing it. And that's the biggest thing, in investing. And if you don't know, because our education system does fuck all for telling you how to properly invest money, unfortunately, we learn more about like logarithm theorem or whatever that fucking was,
geometry, which I did
cosine, tan shit.
Yeah.
Take courses. A lot of universities offer free courses for continuing education or very cheap courses for money management. So definitely take those. It just pays off literally long term, right? So I'll give you 3 quick tips.
Okay.
Know your boundaries, and that's one of the things. And it's okay to learn your boundaries as you go. But if you make a mistake and you slip up and you do something and you go home at night and you're like, I did not like that, I did not feel comfortable, you're not obligated to continue doing whatever you just did that you didn't like. Like, it's okay to explore and like find those boundaries and and state them when you need to. And if you lose clients because of that, or bookers or whatever, like, it's worth it in the long run for like your mental state and longevity in this career. I found like I will lose certain clients and I'm okay with that as long as like my mental state is like happy with that boundary I set in place. And it's okay to pull back those boundaries or explore accordingly to how you're feeling each day. Some days I'm much more explorative with what I want to do, and then some days I'm like, today I'm just not. I don't want to. I'm not there right now.
Totally. Yeah.
And our third tip is respect people's time and energy. So this is more so for clients. If you're reaching out to a sex worker, the best thing to do is to tip them to message you back. Because, you know, especially if you're a newer stripper and you're asking other ones for advice, either to tip them or to offer them some kind of whatever you can. So if you have a large following, offer them promotion, things like that, right? Just to, I know even for me and you, hey, let's do an exchange. Let's have each other on, you know, because we're both working towards something, and we both, you know, find value. There's time and we can help each other. And that kind of in respecting other people's time and energy is huge, and it will come back, and especially in a community like this, it comes back tenfold. So
totally. Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Get ready for our rapid fire question round. It's time for 4 for 1.
4 for 1. Here are your questions. Answer them as fast as you can.
Okay.
What do you think is the sexiest animal?
Ooh, tiger.
Oh yeah, tigers are great. Name one thing on your sexual bucket list.
Oh, you know what? I really want to go to like a Comic-Con thing. And I know that's not really sexual, but like I'd like to like go to like the dirtier Comic-Con version.
A sexual Comic-Con?
Yeah, because I love Mono Mimi and I love that shit. So yeah.
Hot. Okay. Can we just make that happen? A sexual Comic-Con with like orgy rooms and like cosplay, sex.
They're getting hard.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
What's your favorite thing about quarantine?
It's honestly kicked my butt in the sense where I'm going more full throttle on my online stuff. Like my OnlyFans stuff, I have a schedule now that I do. And then my podcast, I've been more adamant about reaching out to people, and usually I'm very passive and let people come to me. So it's really, it's made me more productive in a sense with my online work.
Perfect. And lastly, who's a sex worker activist that everyone should know about?
Okay, so there's a lot.
Number 1.
Oh shit. Okay, I'm totally blanking. Okay, so I don't know. She's not a sex worker herself, but she has a lot of work with sexuality. And her name is Nicole Hodges, and she has it's called Girls Who Say Fuck is her brand, and she's so kick-ass. She has like this thing called Men Who Take Baths, so it explores masculine energy and what that looks like. And me and her have a sex worker thing coming up in the making. So
lovely. I love it. Everyone needs to know. Perfect. Speaking of things that people need to know, I did look up the article that we were talking about as far as making jokes about sex workers, written by Sasha Cohen. It's on bitchmedia.org. So if any of you want to find that article that we were talking about earlier in this podcast, you can look that up. And then please, Danica, tell everyone how we can find out more about you and about your podcast.
Cool. Okay, so my podcast is called 50 Plus a Tip. It's on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Google Podcasts, and 50plusatip.com. Apple Music refuses to love me, but we're working on it. It's a growing relationship. And the podcast episode or Instagram is at 50plusatip. My work Instagram is at Danica_darling_IG, Danica with a C. If you want to see my vulva and give me all your money, my OnlyFans is onlyfans.com/Danica_darling. And you can find me on Twitter and Reddit. Same thing, Danica_darling.
Amazing. What a pleasure. This has been so fun.
Yeah, it has been. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm very excited to be on your podcast very soon.
Yes.
Yeah. As always, to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Yes, the Stripper Podcast airs every Wednesday, everywhere you find podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.
If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at yesastripperpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at yesastripperpodcast. And you can catch the show on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, anywhere that you can find podcasts. We hope you tune in next week. I've been your host, AM Davies. See you soon.